talking truth, meaning, trade-offs, and perspective.
Matt, how are you tonight?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, we had to delay it a day because we had some things going on, and I just didn't sleep well last night.
I know it felt a little weird. I've been used to talking, at least in this format. We talk more than this, as you well know. A certain night and a certain time. It was a little strange for me as well, which I think is great that we like that. It's fun. I was looking at my wife. I think she felt bad. I'm like, I should be talking to Paul right now, and I said, "Look, honey, don't worry."
Yeah, don't look into it that much, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, I went to visit my daughter this weekend in Buffalo, and I made my wife listen to the podcast in the car on the way home. So.
Yeah, and did she turn it off or?
No, she fell asleep. No, I'm just kidding. But it's been fun, I mean, it's getting out there. We've had a lot of good feedback. A lot of the students are buying in. I know some athletic friends of mine are buying in, and some business people are buying in. And we look at the statistics and data each week, but people ask us if it's good. We really don't know. We've never done this before.
Yeah, exactly. Which will lead into what we're talking about today, and a lot of fun ways. But it is interesting to see how this kind of grows. And I know you have too. People ask me certain things about it. It's just kind of nice to feel that there's. You and I both know we got into this, try to kind of have some fun and hopefully help some people. And we're not the end all be all. We don't have all the answers. We never will any more than anyone else will. But to talk about these 4 pillars as we have, and what I know I'm looking forward to is talking to other people, whatever careers or organizations or whatever they're doing with their lives. That's going to be a ton of fun too, and that's coming up here very soon. So I'm extremely excited about that because I know my story, and I know your story to a lot, to a large degree, and talking to some other people and hearing their stories. And for some reason I love failure stories. It's not because I'm some sort of masochist of some sort. I love when people overcome them. And I know when I tell my story to people and I talk about the failures, it almost kind of like blindsides them in a way, like, whoa, holy cow, that happened to you, or that and that. And I think it's motivating for people because it's like, yeah, I've been down and out too. You got to keep going. But I'm looking forward to that from our guests.
Yeah, you know what failure stands for. I'm a big acronym guy.
I know you are.
First attempt in learning under real life experience.
Oh, all right. Hadn't heard that.
That's you.
Yeah, well,
that's me. We're a bunch of failures.
Yeah, a lot of people would probably argue that that's exactly right. but yeah, no, but there'll be a lot of other things. Obviously, I'm looking forward to hearing from people, but that one in particular is I think. In fact, I'll tell you, that leads me into what I was wanted to mention as well. I'm reading this book. All right, and I don't know if you've read it or not. We didn't talk about this. I just got into it. I'm only 52 pages in, and it's about growth, as you can see. And I just saw it on the bookshelf and thought it was interesting, so I picked it up, and it is interesting. And I'll bring up books a lot. Hopefully, most of our podcasts, because they're such a powerful tool, right? They're just so important in terms of this one, growth, but not that any book will help you grow. It just happens to be a book about growth, but any book will help you grow in some way. And I just was getting some value out of this already, and it made me think of the podcast and what we're trying to do. And one of the things that frustrates me when I talk to people who are trying to improve their life probably the thing that frustrates me most is they don't have any confidence. They don't have any self-confidence. And I'm reading this book and it's talking about how common that is, that people don't have self-confidence. And until they gain that self-confidence, of course they're not going to take these other steps. How the heck am I supposed to feel like I can accomplish something when I've been told I'm a failure my whole life, or I'm never going to amount to anything? And I don't come from that background, right? I come from a background of, well, except my brothers, they always tell me that, I was a loser, but my parents were adamant that I could accomplish anything. And my father in particular, and I was just raised that way. So sometimes not sometimes, every time when I run into someone and they're like, they don't have a level of confidence, and I can't relate. Okay. I can't relate to it because I wasn't raised like that. And this book has given me some perspective, going, oh, there's so many people who just don't have that level of confidence. Of course they're having a difficult time getting started and being okay with failing and all those kinds of things. They don't have any confidence. And in order to get confidence, you have to succeed, right? Typically. And there's a lot of strategies in here and that kind of thing that I wasn't, planning to get into this. I just have it sitting here next to me before we were getting on here. But it was just interesting. It gave me a perspective on confidence and a frustration that I always have with people that maybe, just maybe, I can be better at now going forward. Thanks to that book.
It's funny. I was telling you in our pre-podcast again tonight that nobody listens to but us, but we kill it every week.
That's awesome.
I've become in the recent future a big Mel Robbins fan. We talked about that earlier. But the brain needs a filter, and I took a few notes. She's big on something called the reticular activating system, and it's a system that blocks out the info you don't need and wants the info you need. It's like when you go to Facebook. It's like when you go to social media. It's like when you're reading books and dealing with people. You can't physically comprehend everything that's coming into your brain. So you're going to filter what you want to hear. And, if you lack confidence, then you're going to find evidence all day that you lack confidence. If you're around drinkers, you're going to find evidence all day that everybody drinks. If you're around successful entrepreneurs, you're going to find confidence that everybody's a successful entrepreneur. So that's the point, So she talks about you write your goals down, and that's only step one. You have to read them every day, and then you have to literally in your head sit there and visualize Matt Huffnagel or Paul Richmond, the successful entrepreneur. Matt Huffnagel or Paul Richmond, the successful golfer or basketball player or whatever. And you have to see yourself doing it. So your brain starts filtering that stuff. And that's where the confidence comes. If you've always been told you're not this, or you're not this, or you're not that, it's real easy for your brain to filter that, right?
100%. I'm just looking here because, and you and I didn't talk about this at all beforehand. It's exactly what this previous chapter was talking about, is telling yourself over and over and over again, I did that well. Good for me for doing that. That was a good step in that direction, instead of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I could have done better. The same thing. It's the words in your head. And I've been telling the people who dare listen to me for years now. And it's only because I'd convinced myself, and I've read so many other books about successful people. Once you convince yourself up here, that's where, I always say that's like game over. Like, you got it, but you have to convince you. You can't lie to yourself. You've got to truly convince yourself. But how do you do that? You got to keep telling yourself, just like you were saying, and just like this author was saying. And again, I was very fortunate that I had my father in particular is, hey, Matt, you can do anything you want. You can truly do anything you want. You're gonna fail at times, and you're going to make trade-offs, and you're gonna sacrifice, but you can accomplish anything you want. And I've had a difficult time understanding that not everybody had that advantage that I had. But these two books are and it's like word for word almost. Like you got to write it down and you got to keep telling yourself the positives, whatever they happen to be, and whatever route you're trying to go. So, and I'm sure that's not the first time you've read or heard something like that. And I know it's not for me, but you can only hear and read these things so many times before you start to think maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, so everything compounds. These four truths compound, and tonight we want to talk about perspective, right?
We do.
It's kind of the end game of the pillars, but in the same sense, it just kind of mixes in with all the pillars. So
Yeah.
get us started.
Yeah, it does. And perspective, I kind of find to be the most difficult one to explain sometimes. And I enjoy it a lot. When I explain it, or when I was trying to think of how am I going to discuss this today? Were you a Seinfeld fan?
I mean, who wasn't? Didn't you?
Yeah, we never mentioned it before. Big Seinfeld fan. I figured you would.
I had a roommate. I had a next door neighbor in college that looked just like Kramer. But you know what? Maybe a future guest, but that's a whole nother topic. I didn't mean to sidetrack you. Go ahead.
No, you didn't. I would love to meet him. Anybody who looks like Kramer is a friend of mine. Seinfeld. There's an episode in Seinfeld, and my younger brother Mark and I laugh about this episode all the time. Unrelated. It's one of my favorite episodes, but if I were to ask your favorite episode, you'd probably have 100 of them, just like I do. But in this episode, do you remember the episode where Jerry has a rooster, little Jerry, and they're training it for the cockfights and all that, right? So that's that episode, and by no means are we okaying cockfighting, by the way. No animals got hurt during this broadcast. So they're training little Jerry, okay, and it's Kramer and Newman are training him, I think. If I get this right, Jerry comes in to his apartment, and they're there all excited. They're training little Jerry for this match coming up, and Kramer goes to Jerry. Little Jerry just ran from your apartment to Newman's apartment in under 30 seconds, or 30 seconds, or whatever like that. And Jerry's response, Paul, is this: "Is that good?" And they look at each other and they go, "Well, I don't know." That's perspective. You have to have something to compare it to, right? I love that episode. It makes me laugh every time. But when I think of perspective, I think of that. He made it in under 30 seconds. Is that good? I don't know. So it goes back to my Thomas Sowell quotes from last week, and Thomas Sowell, I mentioned it last week as well. Perspective is this: compared to what?
Right.
So am I doing well in life? Compared to what? Am I doing well at school? Compared to what? Am I doing well in any? Am I failing? Am I succeeding? Whether it's politics or work or sports. Tom Brady.
Here we go.
Go. I couldn't help it. It just happened. Tom Brady has 7 Super Bowl rings. Is that good? Well, yeah, it's really good because we know what to compare it to, right? Joe Montana had 4 or has 4, and we have something to compare these things to. Frankly, it's why I always enjoyed baseball as a sport much more so than I did many of the other sports, because baseball had a very consistent level of statistics, right, for its players.
Right.
Home runs and RBIs, batting average, that kind of thing. You could compare Don Mattingly to Joe DiMaggio or Ted Williams in a very similar manner in baseball that you really couldn't get in football or basketball, a lot of the other sports, in my opinion, because of rule changes and speed of the game and a variety of things. But until the steroid era, and some of those things, I loved baseball because I could look at Carl Yastrzemski and say, oh no, so-and-so was better than him. They may have not played, they've been 30 years difference from when they played. So when I think of perspective compared to what? Little Jerry Seinfeld made it in under 30 seconds. Is that good? I don't know. Nobody knows. So you got to have something to compare it to. And if you don't have things to compare to, how do you know where you are on the success board? And I don't think enough people are paying attention to what's going on around them to have the proper perspective. And I mean a proper perspective that helps them, not hurts them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I want to do some comparisons right now. So who's better, Michael Jackson or Justin Bieber?
Well, in my mind, I don't know. I love Michael Jackson.
I know that's compared to Justin Bieber, though. I'm comparing.
And we could probably quantify it in some way by going, who has more record sales, who has more number one, probably Michael Jackson would win most of those comparisons would be, although in my heart, we both know who has my heart.
Right. So again, the comparison good stuff, but at the same time, you have to take your personal experience and wrap that into it, correct?
I would 100% agree with that. In fact, I think you would agree, and if you don't, great. But look, I'm not trying to be Justin Bieber or Tom Brady or who I'm not trying to be anyone other than myself, right? Sure. And I'm trying to be a better myself tomorrow than I was today, and that's hard enough most days for most of us. But we need to have some perspective on what we're working with, what we're working against. What attributes do you have? What disadvantages do you have? Before I start trying to compare my successes to yours, Paul, if I were going to do that, and I'm not, then I would have to go, what does he have? What do I have? Et cetera, et cetera. I don't find that to be healthy. I only find it to be healthy to compare myself to myself, but I want to live in a world of perspective so that I can make good decisions, so that I can be successful. That's where perspective kind of rolls into the success thing for me. By having perspective on what's going on out there, I can make better decisions. That's where really the rubber meets the road for
me. So it's kind of a trap. I mean, we're comparing all the time. That's what human beings do. And yeah. And I set you up on like Michael Jackson or Justin Bieber. I mean, we could argue that till we run out of time on this podcast. I hear it in classroom every day this time of year. I hear it. UCLA, who's going to win the college basketball championship? This team, that team stinks, or that team stinks. I'm like, none of the teams stink. Exactly. Like you're comparing stuff. Okay, the A you can't control, and B that's not true. And at the end of the day, perspective wise, as I get older, wouldn't it be better to just compare what you can do from yesterday to today to tomorrow? And I get some of that's fun and entertainment, but again, you have to use perspective to understand it should just be fun and entertainment.
It should, and your example hit the net. It's a wonderful example because I can hear it. I can hear they suck, they're great, whatever, and you're like, give me a break. These are teams filled with Division I athletes who are supremely talented. They don't suck.
There's 8 left. Come on.
I know. So when I think of that, I think, okay, so where do I gain perspective? Where do you gain perspective? Where does anyone gain perspective? And the answer I could come up with, there were two areas. One is through reading, and the other one is through conversation. It's a back and forth, and that kind of led me to think, this crazy cancel culture we're living in right now. It's so bad. I don't care if, I don't agree with someone, which there's plenty I don't agree with. I would never want them canceled because I want to hear the opinion. I want, that you've heard this before, I'm sure, and I love it. Is, what's the talking about, like hate speech or bad speech? What's the antidote to that? Well, it's better speech, right? What's the antidote to a bad idea? Let's say I come on here and I have this idea I think's great, but it's horrible. Well, the antidote to that is for you to come up with a better idea, right? It's not to shut me down and not let me talk anymore. I need that back and forth. I need that discussion to gain perspective. My older brother and I are super close and very good friends, but sometimes we see things we see things differently sometimes. And I always tell him, I go, you're like my perspective. Like, I have this very strong opinion. I know I'm right. I have all the answers. We'll be sitting around chit chat and talking, me and the three of us or the family, and something will come up and I'll come in because I got the answer, and he'll come in and go, well, what about boom? And I'll just go, oh my gosh, what a different perspective. That makes all the sense in the world. Those conversations and reading books provide the avenue for perspective as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's funny because a big thing about perspective is awareness of what's going on around you, correct? I always tell people, if I think I read a stat one time, like within the last 2 months, 50% of the country hasn't touched a drink of alcohol. And if you don't believe that, well, we just know what half you're hanging out with either way. And it's not good or bad. It's just perspective. Like, and that's what social media exemplifies, because you hang around, you like people, or you connect with people that think like you. And then as a group of hounds, almost, you go after anybody that doesn't think like you. And you start to lose perspective, not because maybe you don't even realize it exists. You just don't have that awareness around you anymore. I mean, I talk about this with my mother a lot, that we live in a time period that literally is the safest time period in the history of the world. I'm not getting killed in battle. I'm not dying of disease. My family's not getting slaughtered or sold into slavery, like by the time we're 30, right? But we look around today and we worry about so many things that weren't even on the scale of worrying 200 years ago. So I know I threw a lot at you, but it's awareness, and it's history, and it's thinking about what you really have.
Paul, you nailed it. You did as far as I'm concerned, such a great job with that. I have the word history written down here because it's so important to understand that. I look at it the same way. As we're living in the most wonderful time in the history of the world. If you're concerned about not being murdered, if you're concerned about not having your children kidnapped, if you're concerned about, equality, not being sold into slavery, like you said, not being raped, not be virtually any negative thing you can think of, we're living in the best time in the history of the world, and the statistics bear it out. It's not even close. Now, does that mean we don't have things to take care of? Of course we do, right?
And still have problems like that.
We still have problems, and it's nice that what we're trying to solve now isn't that that 50% of your children probably are going to die before the age of 2, right? So it's funny you bring that up, because before we got on here, I was like, what books do I have that make me think of perspective? And I had 3, and they're all in the same vein that popped out. One's called Factfulness by Hans Rosling, who I think passed away in the last year or 2. And it says 10 reasons we're wrong about the world and why things are better than you think. Read it. You'll gain some perspective. The second 2 are from the same author, a guy by the name of Steven Pinker, who's a Harvard professor. And if you've never heard of Steven Pinker, look him up. He's fantastic. He's super bright, and he writes like magic. And this is all about why violence has declined. And the second book he wrote that I have here is called Enlightenment Now. And it's the same kind of thing. It's nothing but statistics on, again, we didn't talk about this at all, but it's so fun. Why the world is a much, much better place than it ever has been. These books give me a perspective to go, okay, you got to look around differently than you do. They educate me, and they're fun to read, and I enjoy them. But it's not just that I'm interested in why the world's a better place. I'm interested in why a lot of things are going on. And if I think in these terms, it helps me see the world in a better way so I can make better decisions. But all three of those books are worth your time.
That's awesome. I was telling you earlier today, first of all, I feel like I got to start bringing some books. I'm a little concerned about this, you know?
What I want to know what they are, what you have, because I read voraciously, and like I'm always looking for new books to read and that kind of thing. But I read recently that the average CEO reads about 60 books a year, but the average person doesn't read one a year.
Isn't that
And there's another one. Why are they a CEO? Maybe there's some perspective there. There's something about, hey, look, I'm never done learning, ever done learning, and it's perspective. It fits into our perspective.
you know, I don't have it on me, but I'm bringing books. I'm bringing books next week. I love that because I write them down. I go to Amazon, I buy them. I'm reading one called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and
Okay.
everything compounds. Long story short, like I tell the kids in school, if you got up 30 minutes a day earlier and wrote your plan for the day, maybe you had to finish an assignment from the night before. I mean, they're young, that stuff happens. Or if you just read 10, 15 pages a day, what would happen in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years? And if you're reading stuff you like, even if you're reading stuff you don't like, all right, you set that aside and you bring the new thing in. That's how you get better in life. It's that perspective that I can take this, I can throw this out, I can do this, I can change that, I can build some awareness, and I'm going to get better in the process, and not realize about I'm going to take out all the noise from the rest of the world, even though I know it's there, and I'm just going to keep compounding and getting better. That's why I love the books you read. Like that, I'm picking on you, but I love that stuff.
No, it's so true. I think about compounding, like you just said, and it got me thinking about a statistic I read at one point, some book, and I think the statistic was, all things being equal in terms of your career, right? Let's say you're a plumber and I'm a plumber, and I work 40 hours a week and you work 50. So you're working just 10 more hours a week than me. You'll make something like 50% more a year than I will. Or so we could take plumbers, we could take gardeners, we could take, business people, but pick pick a job. And I'm sure there are some exceptions, but the point is, it compounds. That extra 10 hours gives you, I want to say it's 50%. Don't quote me. It was a large number, a large percentage. If I'm getting 50% return on 10 more, on just working 10 more hours than someone, well, why wouldn't I do it? You're not going to get 1-to-1 on everything. That's the beauty of compounding, right?
Right. No, that's incredible. I try to use perspective in everything in my life. So I always tell people, they're like, I joke when I go get my coffee in the morning and they're like, oh, it's Monday. I'm like, I'm excited about Monday. I have the whole week to pursue my meaning, right? Make some trade-offs, and with my perspective, know I'm going to get better. It's so maybe I'll make some friends this week. That's a big thing for me personally. You're my only friend,
That is sad.
So on Monday, I'm like, maybe some students will actually like me. Hopefully Matt stays my friend. Hopefully I make some new friends. I get nervous about Friday and Saturday, where most of the people are excited because I know my time's ticking for the week, and it's going to be another week where my dreams might not come true or my goals might not get reached. And I'm joking, but all things aside, I don't understand why people don't get excited for Sunday night / Monday to come around. And it shouldn't be a crescendo. We talked about it in an earlier episode. I'm not stupid. I get on the calendar and know, but I really don't care what day of the week it is, because my perspective and all the other pillars, I'm just out there getting after what I want to get after every day.
It feeds right into meaning, doesn't it? I mean, it's like, why are you excited? Because you have meaning, because you have a purpose, because it matters to you. And part of the reason you have that is because you have a perspective, much of which you've created on your own, right? On the way you look at the world and what you decide is important and what you decide to do with yourself and your time. And that perspective ties right in with your meaning. And before you know it, you have more joy in your life. You have more happy moments. You feel good about yourself. Your relationships are better with your wife and your children, and your coworkers and your students and everyone around you, because you have a proper perspective that I believe gets built in a lot of ways with the fact that you have some meaning in your life. But at the same time, that meaning comes from understanding perspective. You know, there's some back and forth there. And you know, one of the things I find difficult about perspective, though, is it can be challenging because I think this is biological, probably from a protection standpoint. I'm 45 years old. 25 years ago, I would have said, if I've accomplished what I am, let's say today, I'd be thrilled, right? Or as an athlete, someone says, oh, if I could just make the team, that would be great. Well, once you make the team, now you want to maybe play a little. Well, once you play a little, now you want to start, right? Once you start, now you want to be, you know, a bigger participant, or maybe the star, or whatever the case may be. We're always kind of taking it up another level, right? So our perspectives change a lot in terms of where we're going in life and how we look at things. Our perspectives do change, and that can be difficult. It can be difficult because you're going, well, when am I going to be satisfied? And because of that, I think people get frustrated, and because of that, I think they can lose some. They think, oh, I'm never going to be happy. But that's a challenge of perspective.
There you go with happiness again. And you know, I don't think we're conditioned as human beings to ever be satisfied. We shouldn't be, right? So
Why do you think that is? Just curious. Why do you think that is? Because I think it's biological. But
no, I think it is. I think, listen, I can't go back way in time. I can't watch videos. I'm a teacher. We just watch videos. I can't go back 400 years ago and watch videos of why people weren't. But I think it's a survival thing. I think it's that's how you survived. And what gets lost today is so many of the instincts that didn't keep us satisfied to keep moving on are just taken care of just because. You know, I mean, you know, a year ago we were worried about toilet paper.
Right.
I mean,
great point.
When in reality, I could have. Well, I mean, there were other things you could have used, and big people were freaking out about it. Like you could have survived, you know,
right?
Perspective. So when you know, I coach teams, and when you have to cut people, it's hard because you don't ever want to shatter someone's dreams. But perspective-wise, they don't have a fit into the team. They're going to want to do. I want to just make the team, then play, then start, then be an all-star. When maybe they go on and learn to be an excellent piano player. I mean, I'm just giving that example. So that's another part of perspective where I used it last week. Just shift gears. Like if something means a lot to you and you don't get it, take that energy and shift it to something else that means something to you. And one of my favorite authors, I've told you in the past, is John Gordon, big motivational guy. You threw a lot of books up tonight. You didn't throw one of his books, and I'm waiting for it. Okay, I'm not going to call you on it. A big thing he likes to say every day is you wake up and say, I get to, not I have to, not I should. And if I'm telling you, you know, I mean, I don't know if you say those two words specifically, but you get it. When you wake up and I'm like, I get to do this, I get to do this, it perspective wise, it just opens the floodgates for opportunity.
It does. And even, you know, it's still so hard to do. Even, you know, I've been trying for years to be better, better me, and in so many ways. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff and reading about it. And it's one of the joys of this podcast. I actually get to verbalize it as opposed to just, you know, talk to my dog Rusty, and he only listens so long. And and I go, woe is me far too often. You know what I mean? My life is wonderful. And I have so many wonderful things in my life, relationships and just so many things. And even some days I'm just like, I'm on my way home or on my way somewhere, and I'm like, this is blah blah blah. I'm upset. And then I do try to go back and go, get it together, man. Keep this in perspective. This is what, first of all, this is what you wanted. You're living the way you want to live.
Right.
So careful before you complain too much. Although we all have our bad days, but I try to do the same thing because it'll sneak up on you. And if you don't pay attention to perspective, it'll bring you'll bring yourself down by not paying attention to it. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it's so important. That's why it's a pillar for me.
Right.
So important to constantly remind yourself of, this is where I was and this is where I am, or this is where I was and this is where I am. But look, I'm here, and things will compound. But this is where I was, this is where I am. But boy, I could be way down here if things, if I didn't have some more control over this, and I'm going to get back there. But boy, things could be a lot worse. I could be living on the streets. I could have people, nobody in my life who loves me. I could be living 120 years ago, and even my best day would be, worse than most people's worst days today. So, we're living in the best time in the history of mankind. Maybe I should appreciate it a bit.
You know what you know. I mean, perspective really becomes your reality, right? I mean, it is your reality. And someday, God bless my wife. She's the greatest and an inspiration to me. If she ever comes on the podcast, she's had a couple of procedures early on that I was the one that if I got pricked giving some blood, I would pass out and say, oh my gosh, I can't deal with it. And she'd look at me and say, seriously?
Right.
But it's all I dealt with. Right. So the perspective, but it still makes you stronger, because the perspective is like, all right, I can't complain. And that's another big part of perspective. Don't complain. Just try to figure out what's going on around you and get better from it and realize there's a bigger picture.
Yeah.
She helps remind me of that. I mean, she's awesome. And that's a whole nother story if she ever comes on. But that's a big lesson in life.
It really is. And it reminds me, I'm kind of chuckling because I had both my wife and I had our second COVID shot last week. And
welcome to the club. Hey,
all right. Hey, where's my t-shirt? We were down and out for a good 48 hours. You know what I mean? It just hit us that way. And luckily we knew why, and we knew it would go away, in like 48 hours or whatever it was, 72 hours. For us, it was probably a little less than 48 hours. But when you're not feeling well, and that you brought up your wife, and I know a little about her story, of course, but you gain a new perspective on what matters, right? I mean,
100%.
I was just like, I had a little bit of a fever and a headache, and my arm was sore, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst. I couldn't focus on anything else. I was talking to my wife about it, actually. That's what brought it up. I said, if this is how I felt all the time, the possibilities of me doing anything positive day in and day out and building my businesses or building my relationships or doing anything productive would have been right out the door. And I said, guys, that's why it's so important to take care of yourself, and that gives me perspective. And then that makes me go, well, maybe I'll go work out today, instead of going, I'll take today off, no, I'll get this one in or whatever the case may be. But those reminders, that's perspective knocking on your door going, pay attention. Yeah.
I mean, there's not a day goes by that that I'm like just excited. I get to be with my wife, get to be with my family, get to do what I do. And I've said it, I don't walk around like a bobblehead just being all positive, thinking everything's gonna work out. No, you have bad days, but I positively know I have a perfect track record getting through every day. And and that's perspective. So I don't want to dwell on the past, but you can use that as part of your perspective.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of have this thought of perspective just doesn't have to drag you down. It can lift you up too, right? In fact, you would like to use it in that way. It's, hey, I know what I'm capable of. I know that I'm going to get through this. I know that tomorrow's a better day. I know that if I keep eating right, or I keep doing those push-ups, or I keep getting up an hour early to read, or I keep, investing into that business or whatever. If I keep doing the right things, I'm going to reach my goal. I know I'm a believer. I know I am. I might not reach as fast as I want. I might reach it with more pain than I had hoped, but you're not going to fail until you just quit, right? I mean, that's the only time you fail. If you keep going, you're going to get there. And that perspective, I hope, drives people forward.
It's like the great Kelly Clarkson says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's like the great Miley Cyrus. It's about the climb, right? And if of course, that leads me to my Lil Wayne quote for the night.
I was hoping.
The great Lil Wayne says, "I like people that enjoy life because I do the same."
Yeah.
That's perspective.
Yeah, it is. And you kind of touched on it earlier, and that no, you mentioned it earlier about the people you hang around. And Lil Wayne, of course, once again hits the nail on the head. It's when you're around people who have a positive outlook, you're gonna have a much more positive outlook. And if you're around people who have a negative outlook, it's gonna bring you down. And I think that's very important for people to recognize. You need to surround yourself with the right people. And if you haven't, you have to make that change. As difficult as it might be.
You think there's people that could find a $20 bill on the side of the road and complain it's not a $50 bill?
Yeah, we've all met those types.
It's unbelievable, I don't know, Matt. So listen, sum up for me in one sentence what perspective should be.
I think perspective is there to keep you grounded and provide you hope.
Wow, that's good. I mean, keep you grounded and provide hope.
Yeah, I think when you're doing it right, it'll keep you grounded. Understand you understand your surroundings. You understand what's going on. You don't get too high or too low because you go, hey, look, even COVID at first was, we didn't know what was going on, right? It was
right.
Horrible, and there's still a lot of horrible results to it, of course. Well, once the data started to come out and the information, you could go, okay, now I have some perspective, some data, and keep me grounded, keep me from getting too excited. I use the what we talked about with this being the I'm going to go get on an airplane. And all anybody ever talks about on an airplane is the airplane's going to crash. Well, if I know airplanes hardly ever crash, there's perspective that keeps me grounded. Just that's kind of the grounding part of it. It also gives me hope. I can, like you said, I'm going to get through this. If I keep doing the right things, there's going to be a positive outcome. So perspective in its best sense for me helps me relax, help me understand this is part of the process, helps me not get too wild-eyed and crazy one way or the other. That keeps me grounded. And then I go, okay, putting one foot in front of the next. Keep doing what you're doing. Make those good decisions, do the right things, and you're gonna get where you're trying to go. So keep you grounded and provide you hope. That's what I think of when I think of perspective.
I love it. I have no comeback on that one, and I like to talk. So I want to take a couple minutes quick. So we're gonna have a guest next week. I mean, that's the part we're getting to, and we won't say anything now. But the whole point of moving on with this podcast is our guest's going to tell a story, and at the same time, we're going to be looking for points of truth, meaning trade-offs and perspective. Correct? And there's no 25, 25, 25, 25. They come in various percentages, but we believe, and that's where we thought of the thought of this podcast, is every single story has those four pillars.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, everything's going to have the four pillars in them. Where they come in and how we recognize them, that'll be half the fun, right? That'll be the enjoyable part of going, hey, there's some meaning there. There's truth. What kind of perspective did that give you? What were the trade-offs? It's, we'll hear that in their stories and that they're telling us. And that's what drove this whole thing for us, was we wanted to hear all this stuff and hopefully provide some motivation, some hope to people out there, because we both talk to a lot of people and we recognize there's a need for this. We enjoy it. Our guests are going to provide us, we know, some great stories and great life examples. And these first four episodes were fun for us to talk about and hopefully lay the groundwork of what we mean when we talk about the four pillars. But now we're going to put them into action, right?
You know what's exciting? I have a whole book here of guests we've talked about. About 2% know their guests right now. The rest probably can feel it, right?
Yeah, I'm confident that Bieber will start taking my calls any day.
Well, I mean, if Tom Brady and LeBron and Lil Wayne, and I mean, it just makes sense. It just fits.
Yeah, that would be something. And those are all wonderful, talented human beings. But well as I do that there's wonderful, talented human beings out there in all of our communities doing great things, whether they're business people or educators or in the medical field or I mean, someone who's just at home raising their children. There's stories everywhere and success stories everywhere, and that's going to be the fun in this. And I'm looking forward to asking questions and hearing stories and seeing where all this heads. It's going to be, we're where we've been waiting to get.
Yes, and we're going to find there's more people out there than you can imagine that have these stories, and I think it's going to be good for them to share them. And it's going to be inspiring and motivating for others to hear them. Because again, I talk about that filter early on. If you listen to us and you're hearing these successful stories every week, you're going to say, well, why wouldn't I be? I'm going to start doing that. Or, wow, I didn't realize I did that. I'm going to start pursuing that even more. I'm being a little vague there because we've already talked. We've got a whole gamut of stories. It's not just sports or business or school or personal. So I think it's gonna be uplifting for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to see that the successful people out there are just like everybody else. They're just probably making different choices, and the reason they're making those different choices comes down to truth, meaning, and perspective. Because the choices is a trade-off here. So they're probably making different choices, and those choices are driven from the other three pillars. And then we'll probably talk to people who don't really even think they're doing anything special too, and we'll be like, my God, your story is unbelievable, because they're just living their life, right? They're just grinding it out day in and day out, and I'm excited to talk to people who some people probably, I'm sure a lot of people never heard of, because look, not everyone's going to be Tom Brady or Lil Wayne or Justin Bieber or any of these magnificently successful superstars. Look, I'm never going to be any one of them. Doesn't mean I can't live a successful, fulfilled life. I have every intention to continue doing it, but I don't have to be, on stage in front of, 20,000 people to to be a success, and neither does anyone listening to this. So I can't wait. I just want to hear the people tell their stories and see where it goes. It's gonna be so much fun.
I'll end with this. I mean, no offense to those great people. Their stories have been documented and told a million times. We're going to be sharing stories of people that they're not as widespread, but they're going to be equally as motivating, probably because people like you and I can relate to them more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I was sitting in a room or talking to LeBron James, how relatable he would be to me in a lot of ways, because he's just unbelievably gifted. You know what I mean? And I'm not. I'm just not.
I think you're gifted.
Well, I appreciate that, but you're wrong. So I'm with you. I kind of, the thought of talking to people who are just your run of the mill human beings and your communities is going to be fun.
Hey, I think we nailed it, and I'm looking forward to our first guest next week. So
can't wait.
Matt, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
All right, Paul, have a good night.
You too. Bye.